I want to thank everyone for being here and thank our participants also who are joining us online. And special thanks to Lina, to the Asfari Institute for setting up this wonderful event. I would recommend coming to this conference room any day. There's always something exciting taking place, and we're so happy to be in this wonderful, space. Today we're here to discuss a new book that came out. My colleague and friend, Sari Hanafi, congratulations. It's Studying Islam in the Arab World, the Rupture Between Religion and the Social Sciences. Professor Hanafi is a professor of sociology and the head of the Islamic Studies program here at AUB. He's leading a very important debate on how to shape this program and how to actually create an Islamic studies program at an American university in the Arab world. So this is a major contribution in that direction. I want to welcome our panelists. I'll start with Dr. Aziza Al-Hibri. Dr. Hibri is a cultural icon. I happened to be in Washington, D.C. when you were actually an inspiration to a lot of us, and we're so happy to have you here. Dr. Al-Hibri is a professor, used to be a professor at the University of Richmond School of Law. She's the founder of Karama, and it's Muslim women lawyers for human rights. She's a Fulbright scholar, author, public speaker. So happy to have you here. Dr. Mohammad Hashas is coming to us from Rome. I must say, of the long list of publications, I only picked 3 books to mention today. A book that came out in 2019, The Idea of European Islam, and a book that came out in 2017, Intercultural Geopoetics. And there is a very important edition that came out in 2021, Pluralism in Islamic Context. And there are several other very relevant publications to this discussion today. And then last but not least, Dr. Bashar Haydar, our colleague from the professor at the Department of Philosophy, also the Atallah Chair of Ethics here at AUB. Sari, we will start with you. Kindly, if you can present the book in 20 minutes, and then we'll give 15 minutes to each of the participants. Please share questions at the end of this presentation. Tfaddal, and congratulations. Yes.
Thank you so much, Enass, for your presentation of us and the book. Well, I consider this book particularly is a kind of autobiography, in a sense that I grew up in a milieu in Syria where in the 80s where I was exposed to 2 different groups. I mean, a Palestinian almost Marxist leftist group, and a Syrian where it's more religious group. And so I saw to which extent the total absence of communications between these 2 groups, and the labeling of each other, and the impossibility of and the absence of any space of talking. I mean, I do remember in Syria the only time I saw a debate. It was between Sheikh Mohammed Said Ramadan al-Bouti and Syrian philosopher Allah yarhamu. No. Yeah, it will come, and this philosopher completely destabilized because it is a show with the public where al-Bouti control, if you like, the audience, and the other is not Sadr Jalal Azam. So So and then, of course, the Arab Spring come, and um, the Arab Spring come to expose this, to which extent we have two elite formations and they don't talk to each other. And I think this is, I would attribute, I mean, this is one of fault line of conflict, societal conflict. I mean, this secular versus religious. I am not reducing all the division to this, but I mean, I think, for instance, in Egypt, I mean, this complete mistrust between the leftist from one side, the nationalist, and the Islamists from the other side, and the Islamists didn't understand that society are really scary about their public liberty, and the leftists are scary about the Islamists, from the Islamists, and to the point that one group will ally with the army against the other. So this show to which extent this this rupture between these two groups. So and then I study. I spent 5 years working on knowledge production in the Arab world, and I saw how social research, particularly, is delegitimized not only by the authoritarian state, so arrogant, don't want social science for its public policy, but also religious, some religious authorities also, I mean, afraid from social science. So this is when I decided to conduct a big survey on curriculums, what have been taught in Faculty of Sharia and Islamic Studies in the Arab world. And particularly looking to the social science and the humanity content, and whether there is something content within, while people, I mean, graduated from any faculty, from كلية جامعة بيروت الإسلامية, and any in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Syria, etc. So I think this is yeah. So I did this survey. It took 5 years with people helped me on this in Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria, where it's clearly you have this influence of Azhari school of thought. This is a classic, if you like. Simply, it is not interested much in innovations. I mean, just to give you example, if you look to the fiqh of marriage taught in the University of Damascus, you find easily that I mean, the condition of sanctioned or to be witness of a marriage is something doesn't belong at all to a 20th century when the book is written. It's about someone should not be slave, the woman should not be I mean, whose mother is a prostitute, things like that. I mean, it's but the son you can get married with the son, but not with the daughter of a prostitute. So you see a flagrant contradictions, if you like, even with the very book is written. I mean, in the introduction, for instance, where there is a small introduction to say Islam didn't discriminate, and then when you see in so this is Azhari. When I mentioned Azhari, it's a really classic. It's repetition of what have been written between the 2nd and the 4th Hijr century. In Lebanon, I was surprised. The same curriculum almost in the 7 universities I study here. 2 of them Shia. One. In Kuwait, at example of the Gulf, if you like, it's really Salafi curriculum. Just to give you just an example, the importance of my work when I was interviewed by Al-Qabas newspapers about my work on Faculty of Sharia in University of Kuwait, and where I show that it's amazing in Faculty of Sharia they are against political parties, against democracy, against many things that Kuwait is pioneer compared to the other country in the Gulf. And when I arrived to Beirut, I found 10 missed calls, and this missed call from the Minister of the Endowment, Al-Waqf, where he called me, say, are you sure that this is taught in our university? I said, yes, absolutely. And say, can you send me the evidence? And I scan the book and I send it to him. So just to show you that really even this miscommunicate, this if you like, a kind of a certain autonomy of this religious sphere, even in a semi-authoritarian setting like in Kuwait. And then in Morocco, I found something different in two levels. First of all, you have 62 departments to teach religion in Islam, if you like. Half of them are Faculty of Sharia, so it's related to Faculty of Sharia, Department of Dawah, but of Fiqh, of Hadith, etc. And the other half is in Faculty of Art and Literature, Kulliyat al-Adab, and they have Islamic studies. And we see when you compare Islamic study to religious study, because of this encounter, what also I criticize is not always a healthy encounter, but it's more juxtaposition between sociology and Islamic studies than interaction, if you like. That nevertheless, you have a very interesting generation of Moroccan. I think Mohamad Hashas, yesterday his talk, show I would say the exceptionalism, the Moroccan exceptionalism on how to deal with the religion in relation to secularism and other. So I interpret this thanks to the taking what we call high objective of Islam. It means that we don't deal with the fiqh literally. We don't recite something written before, but we question, we give, it's more prone to ijtihad, if you like, in maqas, what we call al-fiqh al-maqasidi. And Algeria is very interesting, is between this classic and maqasidi. So I don't have time to say more, but I would like only, I mean, in the book, if you like, there is 2-3 things I think important. The first, how to teach religion in university. I mean, I am someone, identify myself secular, but I think religion should be taught in the university. If we don't like religion to be taught in Islamic, in Quranic schools, let's taught this here. And I think this call have been done before me with Ahmed Dallal. Ahmed Dallal, he say maybe religion should be taught in cultural studies. Should be definitely taught in Arabic department and so on. So I think religion is something important, and the question how to teach it. And I have a whole chapter about this, but I'm more interested about how in the last 50 years, half of century, how there is some reflection that we need to connect with social science. And this reflection started from the late Palestinian philosopher in Washington, Ismail Farouqi, who found a triple IT, International Islamic Institute, International Institute for Islamic Thought, and this institute who elaborate, if you like, the idea of Islamization of knowledge. And of course, it's not without relation to W. Du Bois and all this, if you like, the Afro-American movement of looking for authenticity, looking for decolonial or thought. So it was in the same strand. And it's very interesting that Ismail Farouqi thought that in a way, but when it was arrived to Arab countries, it was us and them, and we don't want to deal with the social science. Ismail Farouqi said we need to absorb what the West give and then reflect on it. The laboratory for this Islamization of knowledge was in International University International Islamic University of Malaysia, IUM, where I studied also. And I found that it's a very interesting how they moved in Malaysia in the last 5-6 years into negating this Islamization of knowledge and making something really much more reasonable, if you like. So I show where is the problem with Islamization of knowledge, even when they talk about integration of knowledge. I mean, you integrate what? I mean, and the idea that all science under one unicity of knowledge. I mean, and this unicity come from God. I mean, so they have a lot of reflection on this, which simply I argue that I didn't see fruits. If you like, now we know, and I am talking as somebody who traveled a lot as president of International Sociological Association and before as a vice. For instance, the question of family today is a salient issue. Family authority versus, if you like, neoliberal state and the individualization, if you like, introduced by late modernity and emotional capitalism. So even this issue, you don't find something where you say, wow, really it is, we hit into how to deal now in the complexity of the family in the global era. So this is where my criticism. And then I propose, so philosophically I say, historically we thought that society, there is two separate things, the religious and the secular. And the secular is in charge of social, political, cultural, economic. And then if you ask a religious man, they will tell you religion is, we need to do our social relationship, politics, culture, economy, according to our teaching, Islamic teaching. So religion become everything. So I think if we put a category called ethics, and I challenge you to show me any problem in our society where you don't have a one component is ethics inside. For instance, COVID-19, should we confine people at home or not? There is an ethical question about that. I mean, should let a lot of people die but not starving, or starving but... So this is always a question. So in that case, if we put the ethics as overarching, in that case, you don't have this dichotomous between the secular and the religious, and the way this dichotomous is really inherited from French model of secularism. So I propose a methodology, call it separation, connection, and pluralistic action. And I mean by this that if we agree that any problem has an ethical component, it means that we need the intervention of moral philosophy, isn't it, Bashar? Yeah, always moral philosophy, and religion. I'm not saying this is how necessarily I will approach it, but people when they will have a reflection about a problem, they will intervene the religion inside. So in that case, we need to study it according to the epistemic related to each science. So there is episteme on how to infer from the Islamic tradition, the Quran, the Hadith, etc., from one side. And there is a way of doing anthropology, sociology, medicine, etc. So the idea that there is one methodology this is, if you like, what Islamization of knowledge say is a very problematic. You need absolutely to respect the epistemology of each science, and then we connect. How the connection will happen? The connection will take into account I used to say the worldview. Each society has a worldview on something, so the policy, when a state do a policy, if you like, worldview is related in France maybe to public opinion, but to the tradition, Judeo-Christian tradition, etc. This is the worldview. But then I read 8 books on Islamic worldview where I become very careful not to use the word worldview, because worldview become everything. I mean, the veil of woman is part of the worldview, Islamic worldview. It become so I use more phenomenological concept like life words, where religion reach us as experience and not as instruction, not as a standard. So this is the connection moment, and then I will give example just to explain this, and I will finish with this, I promise you. It's very interesting. The first book about Islamization of knowledge, we say there is question we should not ask if there is a clear answer in our Islamic corpus. For instance, mixity in the schools. This is Mohamad Amizian, who wrote a book on that. That we should not study in social science mixity of school, because we have a clear decision about it. So if we take this example, we need to study whether there is any possibility through the Islamic corpus to think about the mixity, okay, respect the episteme of the religion, and you should do it in social science, I mean, in education and etc. What is with the control group, mixity, no mixity, what happened, whether improve the performance of the students. And then the connection is really, it's a moment where the culture is important. I mean, this question today, for instance, in Canada or in, it's so obvious that we should not separate. So this is where when I say the worldview is a play a role, and how the connection will happen. And then we can always have multiple praxis. One is related to citizenship. It means that we will reach an argument or a solution about a problem, a decision about the mixity of the school for all the citizens. But we need always to allow the da'i, the religious community, to say, I'm not convinced, and I will advocate for my believer other things. So if you like, I think the major problem today we are facing when we talk about relationship between religious community and the nation state, religious community and the problem, is the incapacity to respect the logic of citizenship, and then thinking on the plurality, that there is people religious, there is people they are not religious. So I cannot impose on them one logic, but you can always advocate something within your community as far as your advocacy is not against the Constitution, if you like, or Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or all this, if you like, a kind of firewall, for me is very important. So I propose this separation, connection, and pluralistic actions is to deal with really how religious studies can handle this. Is an analytical separation, and then I ask in Faculty of Sharia, when they study sociology or anthropology, to give it to sociologists to be taught. In Algeria, for instance, they have introduction to sociology, but it's always taught by a faqih. So the idea, the hidden idea is to Islamize it while you teach it, and this is unfortunate, and this rupture is continuing.
Thank you so much, Sari. Please, Dr. Hibri, you have 15 minutes.
Might be less, but if I'm more, you can stop me. Is this on?
You can just...
Yeah.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. First, I want to say I'm very happy to be here. I graduated in 1964 and went to the United States, where I got 2 degrees, one in law, which we talked about, but the other one is in philosophy. I'm telling this to you, and it's in logic. And also, to emphasize ethics, it was deontic logic. So I think we have a lot to talk about. I read the book that Dr. Hanafi has written, and it's obvious that he raises very important issues regarding the intellectual problems underlying the rupture between Islamic sciences and sociology. Fortunately or unfortunately, this rupture is not unique to the Arab world. Some of you might not be aware of that, but since I live in the United States, part of what I'm going to be saying applies to the United States or the Muslim and Arabic community in it. For example, I see some of this rupture in the United States, and not just among Muslims, but also people of various faiths who raise questions. In fact, I was party to a special meeting of the American Assembly in the United States where we discussed this issue among the various people of faith to figure out how can we adjust to a system we're all comfortable in, because sometimes people of faith feel that they're being imposed upon by the secularism of the other side. So this is an ongoing struggle among people of different ideas. There's nothing really new about it. The factors underlying the rupture in the Arab world, however, do contain elements that are truly specific to the Arab history, the Arab world, and milieu, and so we need to give it some attention. And in this regard, I'm gonna just choose a few elements, discuss them with you. You can ask more about them if you like during Q&A. And all these elements you have mentioned in your book, and I thought I'd elaborate on them. One thing that strikes me in the lack of dialogue or inability to dialogue is that much of the problem lies in the lack of proficiency in logical analysis. This is really a serious problem. And I find it even among scholars and not only students. In attempting to solve a problem, I found out that even senior students, advanced students, PhD level, etc., they tend to describe the problem that we're dealing with and then describe the solution. But where's the analysis? How do you know that your description is accurate? How do you know your analysis, your solution that you describe is sufficient or workable? Do you see the implicit problems? How could you see them without the analysis? This is really very basic, very important. And you know, I've lost many students at that juncture where they were supposed to write an analysis. That's when they dissolved. They just couldn't do it. But as I told you, there are senior scholars who have that problem as well. These individuals act as if description is sufficient, including a solution. This, of course, is not the case. Very often, a careful analysis of the problem provides solutions that one has not previously imagined. You just discovered, I really didn't know that this was the reason behind this problem. It was not really very clear to me, but my goodness, it's so simple. If we could fix this, there will be no problem. Okay, how are you gonna do that? You're gonna do it by looking at the analysis. There is usually no logical or empirical analysis, even empirical analysis, which is logical of the problem. And often a careful enough analysis would take care of things. There is, I'm gonna give you some examples. Lack of knowledge of logical fallacies. I'm gonna throw at you some Latin words. If you like them, you can look them up. But there is no place here to explain these fallacies. But one of them is the fallacy of ad hominem arguments, where you attack the person instead of the argument. Somebody tells you something, you say, this guy is a crook, I'm not gonna listen to him. Well, what if he's telling you a square has 4 sides? I mean, yeah, he might be a crook, but he's telling the truth. A square has 4 sides, you know? So you cannot attack a person, at least on, logically, on the basis simply of the fact that he is not reliable or you know, some other issue like that. There are misapplications of certain rules, such as what we call modus ponens, if A then B, or modus tollens, if not B then not A. You see people arguing back and forth, creating conclusions out of premises that are misordered. Okay? And then there is the fallacy, which is very common, which is addressing the gallery. You know, tell people what they like to hear. That's the argument you're going to be supporting. Now, recognizing the premises of the argument from which the conclusions are drawn in accordance with such rules of logic is really a big job, especially if we're talking about a real situation. So in that effort, you need to uncover not only explicit but implicit premises that some people do not express, but with further analysis you can find them. And assuming the reasoning is correct and the premises are the right premises, then you can get the right conclusion, the correct conclusion. So there are many steps before you can get to what is to a conclusion that is valid and sound. All of this is taking place in the presence of, when we do these arguments, in presence of people who might not know enough about logic, or with logicians who would like to correct you. But remember, in the Arab world, in the Muslim world, we had great logicians. In fact, I've been looking at Arabic books in logic, old ones. They use different terminology. I look at it and I see the principles I just talked to you about, etc. Why are we so disconnected from our history? I just want to ask that. Okay, I think you should know where you live now. You should know the civilization of the world you live in now. But why are you so disconnected from your history? All you have to do is go to the library, take a few hours, and look at the great civilization in logic and other things that we have developed, and then compare and contrast. Okay. The other thing is, he will be surprised about the second element. And I think you mentioned it too. Many of the scholars who write about these issues have a lack of knowledge of Islamic law. Surprising? Strange? Unfortunately, I have known, I'll tell you one story which maybe will cover all this and we'll be finished with this point. I have not talked about this publicly before, but maybe this is a good illustration, in which we were having very high-level interfaith discussions in Washington, D.C. I will not mention the name of the hosting institutions. And on the Muslim side, there were poor me and the young, this is an old story, the young rising scholar of jurisprudence, Sayyid Hussein Nasr, who taught here, right? He's a wonderful scholar. The day this incident happened, unfortunately, he was not around, so he could not say something about it. And then a very distinguished scholar with a named chair who looked very impressive. I mean, he's older, he has white hair, he has a deep voice, just what patriarchy tells you, you should rely on his views. So I was asked by the Muslim group that I should present to the interfaith community, it's a small meeting, what Islam is about. Just like what Islam is about from ABC, baby steps. Now, the Christians and the Jews did a wonderful job, very thoughtful, step by step, etc. And I wanted to do the same, and I started, my first sentence was, in Islam, we have basically three important factors. The most important thing is the Quran. The second important thing is the Hadith. And before I could continue, that very impressive professor jumped on me. He said, "You're wrong." I said, "Why?" He said, "The Hadith is part of the Quran." And I'm thinking, he's so impressive, so convincing. I mean, what is he really trying to say? I started doubting myself. Like, what? He said, "Yes." And I said, "How is that? This is not true. It's a whole separate body of knowledge." He said, "But it says," what is it? About Abasa wa Tawalla. That's the hadith to the Prophet. Okay. He's teaching, he's in a chair teaching something related to Islam. I mean, like, I'm not saying he's teaching fiqh, but he's teaching Islam and something. And the Christian and Jewish scholars looked at me and looked at him, and they decided he must be right because he looks more authoritative. And that's the last time I went to that meeting. On the way out, he followed me and he said, "You are our Hajja." I said, "You know, keep it to yourself. I don't want to talk anymore about it." These are professors. If I tell you the name, you'd know them. Major scholars who make basic mistakes in Islam. How do you want them to connect with sociology? I really don't know. Let them first learn what they're talking about. And maybe they hide behind something so that they don't have to go deeper into it. The third thing I want to talk about is the lack of proficiency in the Arabic language. And I'm going to give you an example, and I'm giving here my views, and you're welcome to disagree with me. But there are so many tafsir of the Quran that I listen to in the United States that dazzle me. And the last one came from somebody who has written about Islam. He's supposed to be, well, I think a lot of people consider him a scholar. He is a scholar. And he decided to interpret the Surah 4, verse 34. This keeps coming up in the United States, like, does Islam allow men to beat women? Okay? And you can have an easy solution, or you can sit down and study and give a solution which is considered and developed, etc., whichever you want. Well, they decided to change the meaning of daraba. And now in the United States, when I teach at Karama, an interpretation, I know there are other scholars who said that, but I know they're wrong. We can argue about it. They said daraba is to daraba fil ard. Daraba fil ard. Okay, daraba fil ard is correct, to leave, to separate. But daraba, when I went to school, the first thing I learned is daraba Zaydun Umar. And he did not go away, actually. So I don't go for facile interpretations of the Quran. This is not acceptable because Muslims are not supposed to interpret the Quran according to their desires, hawa, all right? And then the fourth element is the lack of knowledge of modern sciences, which you talked a lot about. But here I'm talking about Muslims not having that knowledge. And actually, there is a schism between East and West, and I'll be talking a little bit about that now, because the West is so different from us, and it is so secular, and it's so strange, and so the imperial policies somehow got into between us and what is culture. What is science, what is whatever, in the United States, where I come from. So let me first say that Morocco, which I guess you talked about yesterday, and I will be listening to your video, and you'll talk now, the Minister of Awqaf introduced a very important system, educational system called Al-Madaris Al-Atiqa. And what's good about Al-Madaris Al-Atiqa is that they teach you both Islam and modern sciences, modern literature, whatever. I haven't seen the curriculum, but I visited them. That means you go to school 2 years more than any other student in Morocco. But I understood that when they go to college, they are the best students in the college because of this Madaris Atiqa. That is a very good solution. And that's in preparation to college, to university, and I suggest that's the place we need to be working on, and that's the place we can go. So, some argue and I would address this, that science is infected with secularism. Am I running out of time? 2 more minutes? Well, okay, let me comment on the triple IT then, because you talked about it, and I know almost everybody there. The challenge with the project of Islamization of knowledge is that you need the scholars and the deep thinkers who do that properly. If you don't have it, you have it in the name of a project. You don't have a project. So the title may have not been quite right, but the idea is good. Ismail Farouqi was a friend of mine, so was his friend, his wife, Lamia. So benefiting from Western civilization and making it consistent with Islamic jurisprudence and values to the extent you can, that might be a better explanation of the project. Dr. Farouqi was looking forward to doing this project, but as some of us know, he unfortunately, with his immediate family, most of it were murdered in their home in Philadelphia. His successor was Dr. Taha Jaber al-Alwani, who was another great scholar, though his forte is Islamic jurisprudence. Nevertheless, and I will point something out to you, in his fatwa to the Supreme Court on the Supreme Court freeze, this is the US Supreme Court of the United States, a case which involved him, I actually involved him. He was on the advisory board of my organization, Karama, Muslim Women Lawyers for Human Rights. If Q&A, I can tell you what the story is about. He was able to present to the US Supreme Court of the United States a well-reasoned Islamic fatwa they could understand and appreciate. He said, I wanted to show them that we have a fiqh which is as developed as the American jurisprudence. That is great because not many Muslims say that. Muslims give you rules, follow them, they don't discuss them with you, etc. We need to move away from that. We need people who can think and develop arguments. This kind of interaction is very valuable that Dr. Taha did. However, 9/11 unfortunately came and had devastating effects. Dr. Taha left the United States and the IIIT had a slowing of the project and a not so fortunate an experience. Now that Dr. Taha has passed away, the question becomes, who will pick up where he lets off? That's the question I really want to address. This is not an idle question. It's also a question for my organization. Who continues the work? It is not like I can change somebody to come and take over the work I'm doing. They have to know how to do the work I'm doing. I have to train them, and it takes a long time, and you have to get a special kind of person who can be trained to do this. How many people can do, let's call it now, Islamization of knowledge properly? Not many. If they could, IIIT would be now doing much better. So what we really need to do is to have more and better education of the type that we need in our community to be able to bridge the gap and be critical, and to evaluate and analyze and come up with the right conclusions that are going to build a society which is not disconnected. Part of me is Western and part of me is Islamic. And I gave a dars Hassani in Morocco in which I spoke exactly about this point. And I said, why are we so afraid to borrow from Western civilization? I know all the critiques, but remember, don't we always say that they took it from us? Right? Okay, they took it from us. Can I take back something? What's the problem? And I can take what is really suitable for me and for my society. I don't have to take everything. I mean, even the people of faith in the United States, they don't take everything from the secular culture they see. So all I'm saying is, let's be smart about this, let's be educated, let's provide for a new generation that can do better than we have done. We have not done so well, they can do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hashas.
Good afternoon, Mr. Khair. I'm very pleased to be here to share in this reflection on this panel. Sari knows this already. When I first read the Arabic version of the book, there's a lot of data on it. So I thank you very much on the great work you have spent to collect that. Being familiar enough with the productions in English and also in Arabic on Islamic studies, I think this is a great source book for scholars to bring these classical institutions and how they are teaching, the curriculum, the data, the interviews he led. So thank you very much for that. This aside, I have a few kind of questions. They are connected. Maybe they are four, but they are related to the question of ethics. We started that off records yesterday, but allow me that. I start with a question to you, but then I will try to kind of reply from my reading, and then maybe Sari, you can reflect on that at the end. You are defending the Maqasidi approach and the integration of ethics and social sciences in traditional curriculum of Madaris colleges, and you seem to, as if you are separating the two fields, but at the same time there is kind of an aspiration that they work together. And I want you to clarify that to me and maybe to the audience, especially that you present, since we were speaking about the case of Morocco, that the objectivist approach kind of seems dominant or mainstream at the institutional level. And the case of Qatar, also the Sharia College and the Center for Chile, or Kyle Center for Islamic Legislation and Ethics. So these are two approaches, and it seems as if you want them to be kind of, you bridge your call for bridging the gap through these approaches. And I know this is not what you do in the book, and you promise that in the future book you will deal more with moral philosophy and social sciences. Maybe I should wait for the next book, but since that this book has come out a few years back, and since then you might have already got clearer answers. And let me say a few things more about, again, taking the Moroccan case that I am more familiar with. At certain moments, while you are presenting, you are not saying that this is the best approach, but you say it's an advanced approach, the Maqasidi approach in Morocco. And at certain moments with statistics, you still speak about the gap between the professors who teach at social sciences and professors in the Islamic studies, and how they are skeptical of each other, they do not talk. And then you also say about the students that those who do Sharia studies at the university level, not those who start from doing Madaris al-Atiqa, the classical, from the early age. I'm speaking those who opt for it at the university. They might have studied in the public university, but at the end they do what they call Dirasat al-Islamiyya, not Ta'lim al-Atiq or al-Asil, which they do from primary school. These are two traditional and then modernized Islamic studies at the university level, which anyone can do, even if, and a lot of, you say some statistics there that students who don't do well in their studies actually opt for Islamic studies. Maybe this is the case for the new generations, just to make a point, and maybe you can respond to that. Because if these are the students or the graduates who are weaker in their studies and they go for Islamic studies at the end, how is it that the higher objectives trend in the country is justified, you know, if it is the weaker ones that are actually promoting it? That's why I do I think that clarification there is needed. There have been lots of transformations in the university, in the Arab world. Morocco is part of it, and the last 20 years we can say they are catastrophic, unfortunately, and they have impacted all disciplines, including the ones that we mentioned. And but maybe the safe space for Islamic studies maybe is the Madaris al-Atiqa, these classical ones that have kept the tradition, and they try to open up the social sciences, but from within the classical training, but not the Islamic studies departments in secular universities. And then the higher objectives approach, always from Moroccan perspective, I don't know if you are making any, you don't make clearly, but I don't want. I think you are not making links between the Al-Jabri's approach of the rationalist Maghreb, Maqasidi, and then the traditionalist in the Middle East, because the examples you give from Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, you say these are the traditionalist teachings, and then the Gulf it's more Salafi. So. From an intellectual history perspective in philosophy, you are falling into that. I don't know if you want to say something, or some links. And then another example, just to complexify the question. The Maliki school, the way things are done at the institutional levels, that the conception of the public good through analogy becomes extensive, المصلحة المرسلة والمسترسلة, and it is done by established institutions, and the king is head of the higher institute of scholars, المجلس العلمي الأعلى, etc., and who appoints a lot of them. And let me give the example of Al-Abnak Tasharukiya, which is called in other contexts Islamic banking. It was introduced in Morocco only some few years, like 4 or 5 years, and the reception of that is very weak. But which means that for the last 70 years since independence, the conventional or Western modern banks have been legitimized or legitimate from a religious perspective through that public good or maslaha al-mursala. Whatever is beneficial for the people, for masses, and is adopted is fine. And this is just one example. So there are things that actually religious scholars say things about it, but very late. They are already adopted by higher institutions, political authorities, for the authority they have. And the religious scholars often they come later to legitimate that. I wonder it is what you think of what the role of scholars in Arab societies. Is it that the model that you are seeking, or at least that you see is feasible, that there is maybe a religious institution that has legitimacy, and then it takes a number of measures at the institutional secular level, and then religious scholars do react, sometimes late, sometimes very late, but sometimes also in parallel at the same time. Is it what you expect from religious institutions and your study of these madaris? If it is so, not all Moroccan scholars would agree with the way they do function. And then I go to maybe the other concluding but major point, to start from maqasid and ethics. Apparently, there is, through your overview, your findings, there is a move to make ethics a separate field from Sharia in general. And in the Islamic studies and in the current debate for the last few years, there is that return of equating Sharia with ethics, right? We talked about Abdul Rahman yesterday, Wa'il Halaq's approach, and isn't it isn't the way you present the role of the social sciences for classical colleges a way of mildly responding to the lack of teaching philosophy in these colleges? So you say, let's teach philosophy or critical thinking through the social sciences. And it's only through that you will introduce critical thinking, the idea of pluralism, and the idea of history and its role in in the creed and the way it is lived. You spoke about life worlds of Islam. And indirectly then, through this introduction, we arrive to the fact that, well, you know, Sharia is one world out of various worldviews, and it is ethical source. It has forms of ethical theories within it, classical and maybe modern, and ethics in general as an independent discipline should take place. And only through that we valorize that plurality that these classical colleges kind of try to negate, though they live it. I give an example. Mustafa bin Hamza is a prominent Orthodox scholar in Morocco now. Mustafa bin Hamza. He's member of the respected institutions in the country. He comes from Oujda region. Has played an important role for Waqf Institute. I mean, building institutes, university institutes, research, hospitals, etc., schools in the region. And recently has been kind of involved in the debates about the Mudawwana, which is creating a heated debate. And a lot of the Islamists are kind of defending him for defending the traditionalist interpretation. A few years back, there was a proposal from a prominent secular writer, Abdullah Tiflabi. He said, he wrote kind of a public letter saying that I do wish to be buried in a non-Islamic cemetery, or that should be a right in Morocco. And then Ben Hamza kind of reacted to that at the time, a few years back. He said, well, negating social facts, so even if they might be very minor, that the Moroccans don't have that question at all. Why should be one voice, one authority or public intellectual like him kind of assume that there are so many Moroccans who do really wish that? It's like a negation of a social fact among, just the point I want to make here. Is that where your work is boiling down to? I mean, the introduction of these ethics as an independent discipline in parallel with Sharia as an ethical worldview, and not the only maybe ethical worldview. So in that sense, we are introducing what other scholars from philosophy, well, you mentioned in the book also, the Pakistani who died in the United States, Fazlur Rahman, you know. He has a statement, they said, Muslims didn't develop an independent ethical theory or system of ethics. But then the reaction of others is that, well, Sharia was ethical, so there was no need. But maybe now that the debates are different worldviews have intervened or contribute to the debates, there is a need to reach that. I do think that's where you move. So these are questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haydar.
Thank you. I hope I'll be briefer. Let me start. I'll come back to the ethics issue later, but and this is very, important work for those who want to know how Islam is being taught, and also you're not only collecting these, in-depth information about all these schools, but also you have a kind of normative claim there. You want to direct. You have preferences and you defend those preferences, and this, in that sense, it's engaging. But I want to ask, what is the kind of motivation there? So let me put it this way. One way of putting the motivation is that you would think that jurists, fuqaha of medieval times were people who were aware of the sciences around them. Whatever is state-of-the-art knowledge in society, they were on top of it. Some of them were more on top than others. Someone like Ghazali is more on top of what's going on in the philosophy and other stuff. But what they were fuqaha who legislating for the society and interpreting the text. At the same time, there are people who are on top of whatever is produced at the end of knowledge in that, even outside ulum al-sharia, outside the fiqh, jurisprudence. So we want our fuqaha now to be like those, to be also on top of the relevant knowledge production when they come and legislate. So if I want to legislate about the family, fatwa the family, I want to know what is the knowledge about the family. What does the family work? Where does divorce happen? What happens if I give the children to the woman versus the man? Who should have the right? All of that stuff, they need to know the sociology, psychology, all the studies that you have about the family. These people should be informed about them. So therefore, it's no longer acceptable for them to have the old style education. If they want to be as in the same position as the medieval jurists, they need to be like them in the sense they know what's going on in society, and therefore you need to actually take them from their traditional schools, which have insulated them. While in the previous past, the schools were not an insulation because the schools allowed all the knowledge to be sifted through them. So now we need to break this isolation because now they become disconnected. And because they perpetuate a certain, by this disconnectivity, a certain way of looking at Islam, and their fatawis reflect that, we need to break that kind of. This is one imperative, one could say, is to revitalize them as the jurists in the medieval time were. But of course, they will not produce the same stuff because the knowledge available to them is different than the knowledge available to those medieval scholars. So that's one. So what's the best approach to do that? How do you integrate the knowledge? So you give them classes in sociology and psychology. They read Freud. They read Lacan. They read cognitive behavioral psychology. They read stuff about patriarchy and all of that. So they become aware of feminist literature. They read social justice literature if they want to legislate about equity between people and what. So they become knowledgeable about it. In that sense, they need to have this kind of curriculum on the side. But there's another project going on here, is that you want the ulum al-shara' itself to be subjected to modernization as well, so that you can actually start looking at the traditional texts in a different way. And maybe here you're not being, in a way, you're not proposing something bid'ah, because by going to maqasid, already it's an Islamic tradition in maqasid. But however, maqasid, if you look at maqasidi of Shatibi's, for example, who is a major maqasidi, the fatwas of Shatibi were not radical in that sense from the rest. The fatwas themselves were very similar, although his methodology can be used now for a radically different. Why? Because Shatibi was living in a world where the worldview of him and of the non-maqasidi is very similar. The review of women is the same. So even if they adopted a maqasidi approach, it would be only importance when it comes, for example, to things like maslaha mursala, peace and war and all of that. You don't have to destroy your country because you want to abide by certain rigid interpretations. So anyway, the question now becomes, okay, if you have the maqasidi and you have this exposure to knowledge around that produced around you, then you produce a different jurist. Whether the jurist is acting as a qadi, as a person who is appointed by the state to make fatawi, or as a Facebook fatwa qadi, so you can send fatwas with the credentials, so you can, and you want to educate that. So this is for me is in a way a fine project. I'm trying to explain the kind of way motivation in a sense, see what's going on here. The question now is how to do that. Now, so you have these Islamic studies in the Western style. You go study there, and you don't assume that you're studying there because you accept the dogma. You study, you can be an atheist, you might study as a historian, as a sociologist, anthropologist, whatever it is, or as literature. And you study Islamic studies without any assumption about sharing the dogma. The question now is, how do we teach this for groups of people who are making moves within a certain game that has assumptions. So if I'm teaching a class in Azhar about Islamic ethics, I would have to think of it as we all agree this is Quran, come from God, and the Prophet is a genuine Prophet, and this is something sacred, and we have to start from there. And then we can confront the issues that face us. How could this text that's sacred allow for slavery, or allow for darb of the wife? How can we deal with this stuff, given that we are exposed to the ethical worldview that we have today? So, and then it becomes different than the secular or the usual program in a Western or Western style university, where now we are all assuming this is sacred, and we are facing challenges. How to reconcile the sacred with what we take to be our more or less strongly settled moral convictions about these things. And here you have to have a view, an ideology about how you approach the text. And that's the issue of interpretation becomes, so the discipline of interpretation becomes the most important aspect of teaching. Now, I assume that your project is something like this. How can we, let's say if we want to have this in AUB, can we bring those people who will become later either official jurists or self-made jurists, and educate them so they will play a more positive role or at least achieve that aim within a certain assumptions we have about what would be a better judge in this case. But in this case, you will not have them sit in a context where everybody around them assumes that these texts are sacred. So they might reach a position where they say, "Oh, look, I think, this is a mistake here about the status of women, and if I don't have interpretation of it, I don't need to interpret it. It's just a mistake." And then you come to this kind of, maybe that's interesting to have them together in the same environment, rather than have one environment where everybody accepts the divine nature of these texts. So maybe one argument for that kind of hybridity not in the sense of bringing social sciences and religious teaching or studies, but hybridity in the sense the crowd itself does not share the same assumption. So in the same class, we will be people who accept that these are the divine nature of these texts, and others who don't. And then this kind of interaction that is perhaps affects both of them in a sense. And we're interested here in the those who assume the divinity of the text, and therefore they come out with a different perception. They have to defend themselves against something else, which they might need to modify the review of the world in light of that kind of challenge. The practical question is how you want to break that kind. Why would people come and study rather than go to somewhere where they are more comfortable? And most of these people come from a lower social backgrounds. So they're not only comfortable in terms of the teaching, they're also comfortable in terms of the crowd around them. They look like them. They come from the same village or the same poor neighborhood. So in a way, it's very difficult. And if you get some select few, and they will not have the credibility. I'm talking about they have this in AUB. Of course, it makes more sense for this to be introduced in major Sharia schools. For it to, maybe we can be a pilot of some sort in a place like AUB for this kind of mixing of not Sharia schools, mixing of people who are studying Sharia, some who are now. I'll give an example of how deal with this with ethical questions, and why maqasidi Sharia can also be seen by some as an attempt to avoid text altogether, and that's a problem I face sometimes when teaching Islamic ethics, in the sense that if the text conflicts with the Quran, let's say, or Hadith, conflicts with what we take to be clearly morally required thing, or it suggests something we think recommends or requires something that we, or approves something we think clearly morally unacceptable. That sometimes we face in the text. And you have those attempt to reinterpret, such as darb. You interpret darb as something else. Now, if you take the maqasidi approach and say, look, the maqasid are this, you can also change the maqasid. They are open for change. So if you say that my maqasid I take are not the 5 maqasid, but more than that, adl is one of them. Al-adl maqasid, ahad maqasid, or compassion, and now I understand that's unfair and not compassionate to use darb. And why should we give the right to darb to one gender but not the other? It's already unjust. Or the right to polygamy, for example. So if you go through maqasid, you end up with a way of interpreting the Quran, which says that maybe at that time, given the context there, this would have been optimal. Now it's no longer optimal. You can say this about slavery as well. And every time you have a confrontation between the text, or at least apparent confrontation, and what we take to be, we deeply believe in morally, you use the maqasid to make the text retreat in favor of what you take to be morally a stronger imperative. And the students who are believers might start to think this is really making the text impotent. And you face that kind of question. And the alternative, you don't make the text impotent. You want the text to actually challenge our views. Here the text is following our views. If the text follows our views, if the text says ta'amul miskin is a good thing, and we think it's a good thing, we have no problem. But once the text says you're allowed to beat up your wife, and you think it's serious error to do that, serious moral, therefore you say, okay, the text has to be dealt with in a way that becomes consistent with my convictions. So the text becomes, follows our convictions, if you want to do. And this is a challenge. You have a heavy tradition against that. And that heavy tradition against it for 2 reasons. Because it's a very long tradition. Second, because the people who are interpreting it don't necessarily see a problem in their own moral conviction with gender inequality. So they already come from backgrounds that are conservative. So maybe if you expose them to a different curriculum, you will dislodge their conviction. But you'll also put them at a challenge, another challenge, which is, would they become people who would basically, the text is secondary. It fits only when it doesn't create moral clash. When it creates moral clash, it's interpreted away, to put it this way. So I find this is a challenge, for if you want to. Now, a suggestion about if one is thinking about scholars, people who study who will become jurists, judges I'm taking this as a kind of way comparison with the US, because as the Hibri said, there's a lot of similarity between the US juristic practices and Islamic juristic practices. Both of them depend on interpretation, especially at the level of Supreme Court, because the Constitution of the US is very similar to the Quran in that sense. It's sacred for the Americans. If you have something is as sacred as a text as it gets in the US, it is the Constitution. And all the legal game at the level of the Supreme Court or federal courts is interpretation. So discrimination is interpreted differently across time. That should not discriminate was not interpreted to include women and blacks at some point. Now it became to include them, and that what understanding interpretation has become. Understanding the Constitution has changed a lot, and it can be reversed now with the Roe versus Wade. You have a different interpretation of what Constitution requires. And in that sense, there is a lot of similarity. Some people say, if we do not take the Constitution literally, then we are not taking it seriously at all. Any open interpretation of the US Constitution is basically imposing the view of, but again, the case of Constitution is different than the Quran because there is no divine nature of that text, but it operates in the minds of the American public. It is treated as if it is. You have to find an interpretation within the Constitution. You can't say, oh, the founding fathers made a mistake. They were really racist. Believe in slavery, and I'm going to cross this out. You can't even make them make mistake about bearing arms, because they said you have a right. It's one of the rights to bear arms. So they have. This is why you have a problem with that, which is similar to the case of things you have in the Quran, where you think this is not obsolete. So this is obsolete, but maybe it was read then. So in a way, it's not alien, that kind. It's not an Islamic, as Dr. Hibri said. It's not only an Islamic context. And I think one would benefit a lot in these kinds of cases from studies of interpretation, including U.S. Constitution theories of Constitutional theory in the U.S. But that's what I want to say about finally. I'm bringing the U.S. Example because in the U.S., as you know, you have, if you want to study law, you study first a BA, a degree, and you have to take maybe certain courses of pre-law courses. So maybe Sharia judges should have a Sharia as a second degree. So you do a degree in history, in a combination. You have to take certain courses as requirements for a pre-law. These are not religious studies courses. These could be sociology, could be philosophy, you could say you have to take an ethics course, you have to take a sociology course, you have to take this and that. And then you do a degree, a law degree. You don't come from your village or town to a law degree and study Sharia. You do something else, pre-law, which is humanities, liberal arts, social sciences, and then you go for a legal degree, because I think there is a lot of similarity between the legal system in the US and with one exception, of course. The legal system in the US, judges make up laws that are enforced by the law, while judges here, they make a lot of fatawi, jurists, they are not enforceable by the law. These are personal ones. How should you eat? It's not like this is legislated in the. So in a way, but it's similar kind of practice. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'll give priority to you, Sari, to
yeah,
comment.
I mean, I will be quite brief, and because I'm interested to have more debate. Thank you so much, Aziza, Mohamad, and Bashar, for this really wonderful reading of my book. Just, I think I can come to more details later on, but for now, just I wanted to show what is my master plan with this work. I think we have a problem today in our society. So much intolerance of debating with each other. Why? Because we don't respect some procedure of communicational action procedures, moral reasoning which has some rules. I think those who are religious, they are today as indoctrinated as many of those who labeled themselves or labeled as a liberal. I'm thinking about France, for instance. The way they are absolutely intolerant about Muslim veil, for instance. There, it's so. I think we need to if you like, to establish some thought how we do our moral reasoning in the public spheres, while we all agree on some fundamental questions of justice, which can be embodied in Universal Declaration of Human Rights or with the constitutions. This is a conception of justice, but keeping the plurality of the conception of the good. It means that we don't have the same conception of the good life. I want to spend my life, I see my objective of life for fun, the other for to be pious to God. I want to drink in the evening. I want to fast the whole, and so on. So how we, and these different conception of the good enter into conflict, and how society deal with this. So how society deal with this, we need to collaborate between different disciplines. This is what I'm trying to say. And the same thing, I see it in microcosm of Sharia schools. In Sharia schools, first of all, the way they are taught Sharia, almost, including in Morocco, Mohammed, is you have 2-3 courses on Quranic, the origin of Quran, about the interpretation of Quran, things like that. About the Hadith, 2-3 courses, and then it becomes the fragmentation. As a fiqh, as a small field, disconnected from each other. There is no overarch, there is no something where, for instance, in sociology, we have sociological theory and research methods. This is two really should connect political sociology, sociology of religion, criminology, and so on. In Sharia, you don't have the equivalent. And the equivalent for me is a course on ethics. And by the way, very few universities, they have a course called ethics. And once they have it, I wish they don't, because it's very apologetic. It's to say we bring some thought before the Fourth Geneva Convention about peace and war. So something really doesn't teach students how they do a moral reasoning. And again, why? So the way I see connection between text and context doesn't mean really not to respect text. So it's not. So I think believer will always, when utter some argument in the public spheres, has a package, if you like, religious argument or religious underpinning that will influence, and we should really respect it. But what is important, how when these issues is debated in public spheres, they will allow this social peace, if you like, that we debate without fighting each other. I will give one example, and I will finish, really. I study with Azzam Tomi, a student of mine, the debate about, I will take a tough questions, like inheritance, gender-related inheritance. I mean, the woman has the half. We study 61 debates happened after President Sipsi introduced this a claim for a draft for a new law, okay, that equal gender equally inheritance. It was 61 debate, absolutely I would say it's amazing, because if the influence of Zaytuna is a tolerant teaching, the influence of a civil society, vibrant civil society in Tunisia, it was a two camp, those who are in favor of changing the law and those who are not in favor of changing the law. The debate was very peaceful. And for me as a sociologist, it doesn't matter whether they end up by changing the law or not. For me, it's a peaceful debate. And we should really respect how people, in the end, they decide. Now, of course, I have another hat. As a human rights activist, I would say how Tunisian society today will if you like, make their law compatible with what universally admitted no discrimination between male and female, for instance. What abstractly they find no discrimination, how they will project it in Tunisia. So if you like, I want Faculty of Sharia, they have this training of how, no matter how dear to keep religion, really the instruction as it is, how they debate it in the public, and how they respect the plurality. That in fact at certain points they say, let's stuck that we keep it for our believer, and we allow the citizen to do whatever they want. This is Al-Ghannouchi position in Inheritance. He said, I will keep saying, O believer, that you should respect the way the Quran said the instruction. But definitely any Tunisian can challenge this and give the inheritance equal. This kind of gymnastic, I think, is a very important. And this is done because of a Tunisian context. I didn't find it elsewhere. In Morocco, a little bit about the discussion of the Mudawwana, where you push things, but yeah, I will stop here.
Well, I want to remind thank you so much to the panelists, to you, Sari. I want to remind everyone we have a bit of time at the reception to talk, but would like to hear some questions. He was before you, and then please introduce yourself, and then Hussein, tfadal. Yes, please.
Hello, hi, I'm Mohamad Al-Jabi, Mohammad Al-Jabi. I'm actually an AB alumnus, and I'm actually one of Professor Hanafi's old students in sociology, introduction to sociology, and I've just recently graduated in conflict studies from St. Paul University and the University of Ottawa. So, and these topics are, I find it, I did my dissertation on something different, but I'm very interested in the issue of relationship between religion and ethnic conflict. So my question to Professor Hanafi, I guess, is, because I didn't have enough time to go through with the entire book, but my question is this. I actually I think you did, Professor Al-Hibri, you touched on it, but I'd like to build a bit more on that, because you mentioned the issue of like the importance of people not just interpreting the religion based on their opinions. So my question comes from, I guess, the critique of Orientalism and colonialism. So the institutions that you mentioned, because we all know like the power relations that govern like all the Arab countries that we live in today. So my question is this: to what extent these religious institutions are in fact influenced by the foreign policies of the former or current European colonizers, or I guess the American war on terror? To what extent this context influences the religious teachings of these religious institutions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Hassan? Yes? Yes, that's right here.
I want to mention the political factor. You see, in Morocco, for instance, before 1998, sociology was forbidden not only in religious universities, like القرويين, but in government universities. After 1998, it's a different scene. For instance, in Dar al-Hadith al-Hassaniya, they teach philosophy. They teach Ibn Rushd, فصل المقال وتقرير ما بين الشريعة والحكمة من اتصال. And they started to teach comparative religions. Yusuf Kallam, he teaches comparative religions. So it is sometimes a political decision, you see, and also the Mudawwana, they started to work on it after the king said to the jurist, you sit down with the حركة النسائية المغربية, and they sat together and they started to work on the مدونة الأحوال الشخصية, and they came out with a مدونة الأسرة which is paradigmatic now in the Arab world. And رابطة العلماء, رابطة المحمدية للعلماء, and all the publication, it's there at the رابطة we have the first مركز والبحوث والدراسات في القضايا النسائية في الإسلام. So to go back to what I mean, to this political question, I mean in many, like in Lebanon, for instance, our مشايخ, they are not also scholars. They are not scholars in other aspects. They are not also sociologists or economists or they study philosophy. But this is very important to have with the whole book is about this علوم الشرع and the humanities. But Maghreb is started to change after this political decision was taken in 1998. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. Do we have please? Do we have questions from the online?
Marlene Nasser, I don't know about the subject, but I'm going to talk about experience in education in law in University St. Joseph, where I had my law teaching, and we had Sharia in each topic of law. For example, in constitutional law, we had a doctor in Islamic study who was giving how in the Sharia, constitution and law from the Quran. In, for example, penal, يعني القانون الجزائي, also from Quran, they were taking a part which was in the Haydar. In philosophy school, I was also in a religious school, French religious school. We had at philosophy and Haydar about the main Ghazali, يعني the four main Sufi, Ghazali, I forgot the four names, given by a priest, and he was inviting a sheikh to know about it, just the text and asking to understand. So I would say that when I went to public French or Lebanese, there is no more about what was in the religious text of many religions. For example, the droit canon of the church, in the School of Law, we had a class on the droit canon, which was the law, Sharia of the church also. And there was Dr. Mahmasani, who was teaching us الأربع الحنفي والأربع شو اسمه مسالك الأساسية مذاهب الرئيسية في الإسلام السنة. ما كان عنا عن المذاهب. بس أنا اللي بدي أقوله إنه بالتعليم في كل مواد التعليم ممكن يدخل طالما حتى في الجامعات الغير علمانية مدخلين النص. And most of the time this is a person from the religious field who was or who is specialized in it. He's a civic person, not a religious person, who would explain it and give this. This is a way to make it more. There is another thing. In for example, I was really very amazed to see that a very important psychologist after Freud, Jung, had a whole many chapters about al-Khidr, about Islam, the main things and beliefs and relation to God and to people in Islam with the text itself. And he didn't know about it, but he studied it very well and introduced it. There is the other way also for people who are doing a specific field, which are not in religious field, to understand what is in the... He made the same thing for Hinduism, for Taoism, for Christian and comparing, but from inside the text, not as a critic of it, and trying to understand the human psychology from this kind of culture and belief. So I think to go through details, and because science now, human science, are very much divided in specific fields, all the religious texts have everything about everything in life. So you would find in a religious text, it's a total text about life, about God, about spirit, about psychology, about society, about law, about Sharia. You would find what is in many religions. And for me, I prefer to make it for a society which is very multiply religious, to make it, to bring into modern science, let us say not العلوم الإنسانية الغير دينية, to bring in the text of religion what is related to this. Because we have it in our culture, but we don't know the text. So the text will be a part of the education. This is to summarize my idea, because I think this is the way to do it and to open it and to accept it from everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will read 2 questions from our online attendees. Kawthar Lawand, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, who's a representative of the Maqasid Islamic Charitable Society and Maqasid University. And the question is, are there any proposed educational strategies that help in integrating Islamic sciences with the social sciences? And then we have one from our own student, Mohammad Tabaja, who is asking, today, should a scholar hail from both Islamic and Western traditions in order to be recognized as a scholar in the field of Islamic studies? I think that's a valid question. We have few minutes for the panel to engage with these comments, and then I will invite everyone to continue the conversation outside. تفضل.
Okay. Thank you so much for all this questions. Look, again, I think my whole project has 2 big objectives. First, I think we need a peaceful debate about how to deal with a divided society we are in. And if I will look to the Mudawwana al-Maghribiya, for instance, I will evaluate it by the fact that it was amazing debate in society without one use the word to excommunicate another, takfir, because he or she said something. So for me, this is really one very important. I mean, this is my Rawlsian way. I mean, I see, or Habermasian way of seeing society. I mean, that there is this fluid communicational action, democratic action, dialogical action. This is one objective. And the second is whether we approach our reading of fiqh, how we interpret fiqh, exactly what actually most of fiqh, most of authorities, if you take, for instance, Al-Qardawi, if you take Bin Bayya in United Arab Emirates, all they talk about fiqh al-waqi'. But in fact, when it comes, whether this fiqh al-waqi' in reality or not, this is another story. So I'm interested really that at least what I'm trying to say, they acknowledge that there is a problem, that because of a tough rulings, that there is this dissonance with youth, for instance, with society. So I am interested to see how they will deal with this. In my language, how we will make our religious ruling, if you like, close to how people deliberate ethically. And by some normativity, it means that how we approach with what I consider a universal in some rights, human rights. I mean, no discrimination, equality, liberty in public spheres. So this is the major issue at stake. And this cannot be done without, and here I am trying to reply to the question, what strategy we do, cannot be done without students graduated from BA of Sharia doesn't know that where got some basic information if you want really not to alienate people while ruling something. So you need to have some basic psychology, sociology, political science, etc. And I would say the same thing for my student in sociology, that they need to know how to deliberate within the Islamic Arab if you like, الحقل التداولي in Taha Abdul Rahman, how you will translate الحقل التداولي. So this is very important. So they need to know how we will do how you reason using vocabulary that these believer, these religious understand it. So this is, so the question doesn't, for me, the West and the East and the local, it doesn't important. I mean, in the end of the day, the youth, I like it or I don't like it, they are influenced by social media coming from X, Y, from China, from, I mean, you know, the most social media influence us is the Gulf, not necessarily, I mean, there is studies showing that for instance, this 15 years ago, a study in Syria media, what the people watch. They don't watch Western movie. They watch Enass, Iqra. They watch a Salafi TV. So when we talk about globalization, I'm not sure that today the problem is with a Western influence. I mean, there is a different influence coming. So the influence is there. How to deal with it? This is this is how I try to reason in this book.
Can I ask the panelists to give like about 2-minute like wrap-up comments to the questions and to the whole debate? تفضلي Dr. Hibri.
I keep thinking of the fact that in Islam itself, the doors are open for discussion and for difference. For example, the question arose, and I think you mentioned it, about can women argue about, I think you might have mentioned it, about Islamic stuff. I think that was the Qatar mosque that they just started. They took the example of Surah Al-Mujadila, where a woman argued with the Prophet, and he didn't tell her, sit down and stop talking, you're a woman. He answered her. He answered Sahaba who questioned what he was saying and explained it to them. So the door was open in Islam for a great deal of shura, of discussion, of interpretation. I think the critical question, which I skipped because I didn't have time, is how did we get to that? A system of, and I have written about it, the terms might be different, shuratic democracy. How did we get from that to the systems in our Arab and Muslim worlds we have now, which are despotic? I think Muslims are, in all their wings and madhahib, will never be free to think or to unite, solve their differences among each other, etc., until they go to certain, we all know them, times in their history which were really very traumatic, and revisit them and re-understand them and solve them together as a Muslim body. Short of that, we're going to keep having disputes who tell us what to do and not go back to the the shuratic, democratic example of the Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah, thank you. I think there is one point that was not mentioned, but that I also liked in the work of Sari. It was mentioned at the end as kind of proposals in the conclusion, and it's very important in the current situation of Arab societies in particular. It's the role of waqf institutions. I mean, in a moment in which religious establishments have nearly all been nationalized, at least the big ones, there is little that these scholars can offer, even in trainings, if they are not pushed by now the sponsors, which is the state, to include to make changes in their curricula from Wizarat al-Awqaf, etc. They themselves are deprived of the means to do that, to expand their curricula, maybe to have their graduates studying in wherever they do wish and come up with maybe a new human capital. Of course, it depends whether first there is that will, besides having that the financial resources and autonomy or quasi-autonomy that helps in that drive. So this one, I think, is important. And the second, which is related to Aziza, allow me to address you in first name. So Aziza is history. At the end, we are here talking about political issues. And these issues seem very important now, and there is kind of dichotomies or polarization in certain contexts. The Tunisian case, maybe the Moroccan case now is a case to study. Maybe, Sari, hopefully you can follow it and with some years give us some reactions to these months of debates in the country. The expectation should not that these religious establishments should liberalize, because it's as if the expectation is that, these by the introduction of the social sciences to religious establishments or madrasas, the expectation is that they change their worldview, which is a point that was mentioned. Is the expectation that, or at least it's that they should be more aware of the diversity from scientific perspective, and then they can at least challenge and moderate their epistemic view of the world, kind of relativize it. We have another perspective or other perspectives. So these are important because the polarization scenes are there, and all these have to be all the time mentioned, kind of to remember that democracy is at the end about that, is to allow that diversity within. It's the management of human diversity, and not to have one worldview, one major view, which has its limitations. The liberal paradigm. I mean, so I stop there with these reflections. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We conclude with you, Bashar. Tfaddal.
I just want to say that, of course, I should be happy that ethics takes a kind of central place in the work, the importance of ethics. But I also want to say that maybe what should be emphasized also, I alluded to that, and that maybe fits with what Aziza said before about logic, but not logic in the strict sense which is needed for any discipline, not only for, but the theory of interpretation. I know in Islamic studies, Sharia studies, you have tafsir, tafsir al-Quran, with ta'wil, but theories of interpretation outside the sphere of religion. Because if you are exposed to interpretation, whether literary text, whether it's stories, whether it's films, utterances, all of these different things, interpretation allow you to approach text differently. And you would realize, as I realized myself, that ethics enter in interpretation, because when you interpret a text, you bring your own baggage to the text to interpret it. And that baggage includes in it the ethical views that you have. And I think if one can introduce in Sharia studies or in Islamic studies theories of interpretation, independently of religion, as how do you interpret utterances, speech acts, behavior, that would actually improve the ability, the analytical ability, critical ability of the students to actually engage with interpreting the scriptures. And I think, again, the analogy with interpreting important texts outside the Islamic tradition, as in the case of the Constitution of the US, I'm sure you can find other examples. I think this is a component that is missing in the curriculum, and it could be easily put because it fits with the expectation of the students, because they expect to know something about how you interpret, so they can come. So I think that's a more practical, smaller point, but it's important to link it with the other stuff as well.
Thank you so much. Congrats again, Sari. This will start more debates, and I invite you to keep an eye on AUB and what we're trying to do, what Sari is trying to do also here. I want to thank everyone. Please, let's have more conversation outside. Thank you.